All right, everybody. Well, good evening. I'm so happy to see everyone logged in tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris McAllister, the clubhouse manager at the Harmony Club. I'm so pleased to see such a great member turnout. And although you don't see them logged into Zoom right now, we have quite a few people who are upstairs in our ballroom enjoying cocktails, socially distanced, of course, as we stream tonight's event there as well. So we're super excited about that. Tonight's virtual session is about retirement, covering all stages for all ages with Jared Finkelstein. We're so excited that he's here and participating. First, though, a few housekeeping items before we begin. I will be muting everyone during the presentation as they log in. Please monitor your muting so that we can be respectful to our presenter tonight. We encourage you to submit questions throughout the program using the chat feature in your Zoom toolbar. We will monitor, I'll try to monitor those questions as best I can, and Jared, I know, will do his best to answer as many questions come in. And feel free to keep your video on or off, whatever you're most comfortable with. This session is being recorded and will be added to our virtual Clubhouse resources available on our website and mobile app, which, if you haven't downloaded our mobile app, I encourage everyone to do so, as it's an easy and useful resource for all things Harmony. As always, I encourage members to stay informed with the Clubhouse happenings through our e-newsletters and staying up to date with our events calendar, which is right on the home screen of our website and mobile app. Now to tonight's program. Tonight's program features our very own Jared. We're so happy that you're here. Thank you. Jared provides his clients with sophisticated estate, insurance, and pension strategies as part of a boutique, high-touch financial services firm. He has been published in Cranes and on Yahoo, and in 2014, he was elected to the Forum 400 based on his reputation and professional accomplishments. A graduate of Emory, he has continued his industry education to better and best serve his clients by earning a certified family business specialist and certified in long-term care designations from the American College. And Jared, I don't know if you know this, but just this week, Jared, is your 2-year anniversary at Harmony. So thanks so much. I love to see members participating, especially in this series, our Harmony Own. I know your family's been members for a long time, but you get your anniversary this week, so we'll have to buy you a drink next time you come in. I'm gonna pass it off to you, Jared. Thank you again, and I'll monitor the Q&A.
Thank you, Chris. So first and foremost, I am 41. I turned 41 in November. So even though it's my 2nd year anniversary, I feel like it is my 41st anniversary. As my grandmother frequently reminds me, I am a 4th generation member, and that was part of the impetus to keep the torch going. And I'm super kind And when Davina and Chris asked me to lend some time today, I was really just pleased and humbled. Kind of before we kind of step in, I just want to say thank you, because I know everybody is busy, and I really do appreciate people taking the time. And I think today's presentation is the genesis of about 5 years of extreme research that has been backed by some Princeton academics and math majors that I'm going to share with you, that I hope will become mainstream, because this is part of the mission that I've set myself out on as a professional. It was kind of funny when Chris was reading the accolades. I still view myself as a 41-year-old kid, but I guess 41 and kid don't go together anymore. But with that being said, I'm going to start off this presentation with a short video. It's about 4 minutes, and it kind of sets up the premise for what we're going to talk about today. And hopefully we do have some time after where I can answer any questions you may have, and really just be here as a resource. And if you see me around the club, please say hello. And I love just making new friends and meeting new people. So with that being said, we're going to dive right in. I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to lead with a fun little video. Okay.
So you're thinking about your retirement, an exciting yet scary proposition. 2 crucial questions have probably crossed your mind. How much do we need to save, and where do we need to put it? To answer these questions, you must remember why you're saving money long-term in the first place. You want to have an income stream in retirement. Think of it like climbing a mountain. What's the objective? Getting to the top? Well, not really. The ultimate objective is really to get to the top and then make it back down safely. In the context of your financial life, getting up the mountain is your pre retirement accumulation phase. Getting back down is your retirement distribution phase. This is one continuous journey. You can't call in a helicopter at the top of the mountain if you didn't bring sufficient supplies to make it down safely. To figure out where to put your savings in pre retirement, you must understand how the distribution phase works. How retirement income streams work defines how to pack your bags in pre retirement. Many people haven't had the opportunity to look at it from this perspective, which can be very costly. Back when pension plans were the norm, retirement planning for individuals used to be more automatic. Pension plans put the responsibility of providing you retirement income in the hands of your employer. Typically, your pension amount was comparable to a good percentage of your salary. Pension plans automatically took into account both the accumulation of money and the distribution of it for retirement income. Around the 1980s, things started to change significantly. As retirement plans like 401ks were introduced, they started to become the norm. These types of plans meant employees became more responsible for providing retirement income for themselves. 401k type plans focus mainly on accumulation of money and not on distribution. When used alone, they can be very inefficient for creating retirement income streams later. For example, to avoid potentially running out of money in retirement, financial research recommends withdrawing only 3 to 4% from these types of invested retirement assets every year to live on. These relatively low distribution rates can be problematic. Think about it. You'd need $1 million at retirement to create just $30,000 to $40,000 a year of retirement income. What about adding inflation to your current income? $100,000 of income today needs to be $180,000 in 20 years at 3% inflation just to maintain spending power. This would require the accumulation of approximately $5 million by retirement time. How feasible does this path sound running your own numbers? Is this the path you would want to stay on if you had a choice? See, the problem in many cases isn't the accumulation of money in retirement plans, but rather the low distribution rate we could be on track for if that's all we do. What if today you could put yourself on a path that provides higher distribution rates from the retirement assets you're accumulating? Then $1 million could potentially create $70,000 to $130,000 a year of retirement income. How? By knowing how retirement income streams work, so you can take action now in pre-retirement to position your savings accordingly. Get off the default path of low distribution rates and contact us today to learn about savings.
Okay, so now that Morgan Freeman is done speaking, even though that isn't actually his voice, we have a voiceover, so hopefully we do not get sued or anything from that sort. Hold on one second. I'd like to move on to our presentation, which I will bring into you in 1 second. But while we're doing that, I want to let people know that I am going to do my best to check the question and answer. So if you do have questions throughout this, we can dive in and take it from there. I had everything locked and loaded, and then of course I'm not very good at technology. I found a way to erase it. So hold on a second, but it will be with us in 1 second.
Happens to the best of us, don't worry.
Yeah, listen,
I did send everyone a message in the chat feature down below. Again, it's in your Zoom toolbar. We look forward to member participation. And I'm really happy. We have over 20 people logged into this, and we have another dozen or so people upstairs in the hub watching. So good crowd tonight.
Cool. So everyone can see my screen? Thumbs up?
Yes.
Awesome. So kind of building off of that, I think it's really important to dovetail on that video. And one of the things we have been trained to think for a very, very long time, and myself, I even find myself catching myself every now and then, where we ask ourselves questions. What's my number? How much money do I need to have to retire? And what's interesting about that question is it's one that's been fed to us and marketed to us for the better part of 30 to 40 years. But the question is really, is it the right question? Right? And I think our Morgan Freeman voiceover friend, who is definitely going to do a better job than I am, but one of the things that we need to be asking ourselves, is it really about accumulation only? But the real question should be, how much income do I need? And then work backwards. And I think a lot of us have not had the opportunity to evaluate the financial decisions we're making and the effect they're going to have on our income. Now, I tell my clients in private practice that one of the advantages I have as just not a 41-year-old, but I have clients who are 51, 61, 71, and 81. And I have the perspective of understanding their perspective that at 41, I do not expect someone to think like an 81-year-old. So what I try and impart is that those that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s have a very different view on things than, say, somebody in their 40s or 50s. But what I try and impart is that perspective is important, because if you ask almost everybody, no matter how wealthy they are, what their biggest fear is in retirement, the answer is usually income, unless they're very, very fortunate. And I know we have some members here who are fortunate enough where income is not a problem, but for most, it's cash flow and it's income. And that's kind of what we're setting out to help and attract and handle today. So with further ado, I'm going to dive in. And if you think about things, this first page here talks about our wealth building. We make our money, we spend our money, and then we have our annual savings. And the question at hand is, what do we do with our annual savings? And we break it into a couple different buckets. We have our short-term bucket. And most people are pretty attuned to this, which is things like liquid assets, checking accounts, savings, money markets. And they're for short-term situations like emergencies or opportunities, or just to create security. But then we have our long-term savings. And I pose the question, what is the underlying premise of all long-term savings that anybody does? Why are we giving up the enjoyment of our income? Now, don't get me wrong, we can all hang out at the Harmonie bar, spend every dollar we make, and be very, very happy. But the reason we're giving up some of our current enjoyment, for most, is to have an income stream in retirement. Now, for a lot of my clients, there's a secondary piece to this. It's not just the income in retirement, but it's legacy for their next generation. So most people are giving up current enjoyment of their income for an income stream in retirement and legacy for the next generation. Now, this presentation is going to be heavily focused on income, but legacy does come into play as well. So the question I like to ask is, well, wouldn't it only make sense to understand how these retirement income streams work so that we can direct our savings in a way that'll give us the highest income when we retire? Stated another way, understanding how retirement income streams work economically will ultimately define how we allocate our savings today. And the sooner we can get on an efficient path, the greater impact it will have on our results. So this is my favorite analogy, and I use it oftentimes, is what is the objective? Is the objective to climb the mountain, pound our chest, and say, I did it, I got to the top, I hit that point? To the point that my Morgan Freeman friend said, the answer is no, not really. It's just the beginning. It's a continuous journey of accumulation, climbing, and distribution, coming down the mountain. Now, interestingly enough, if we use that mountain analogy, we need to make sure that we have enough supplies and water and oxygen and food while we're climbing the mountain to not only get us to the top, but to also get us back down safely. If we do have any extreme hikers or whatnot, I'm sure they know the statistic that most challenges actually do not occur on the upswing of the mountain. It's while coming down the mountain. Either they run out of food, they get hurt, there's downward pressure, and it's no different in your financial life. The distribution phase of our life is far trickier than the accumulation side. And the main reason is, for many, when we're in the distribution side of our life, we are putting a lot of pressure on our assets. And if we're wrong, it's exacerbated. So I always like to tell people, when you're climbing and you're in the accumulation phase, not that you want to make mistakes, but if you make a mistake, it's kind of covered up a little bit, because we have another check coming in next week and the following week. We have money coming in to kind of put a Band-Aid on these mistakes. But when we don't have that check that keeps coming in anymore, those mistakes that we may or may not make in distribution can be really, really painful. So when we're in this retirement phase, we're not only thinking about the accumulation, but we need to think about the distribution as well. And I think the key is understanding how income streams work during distribution will ultimately help us pack our bags in pre-retirement. And the thinking here is always begin with the end in mind. So let's talk about the problem. The biggest problem is understanding how retirement assets react to fluctuating returns when money is being withdrawn for income. So let's look at an example. Okay, constant returns. This is something we need to take a very, very short period of time, but really hone in on, is that constant returns are oftentimes what are modeled for people. So for example, in this page, we're looking at someone with $1 million of assets who needs the money to last 30 years into retirement. And we chose, on purpose, I might add, a period of 1970 to 1999. Happened to be a really good time for the S&P 500. The average return was 14.84%. So if somebody were to retire with $1 million and take a 10% distribution rate, that's not what they earned on their money, but simply what they took, they would have a beautiful, beautiful retirement, because they would have earned 14.84% every year. They would have taken their 100 grand and they would have had $15 million left over. But everybody in this room, because I know everybody's smart, knows that that's not how real life works. Real life works something like this. These are the actual returns of the S&P 500 from 1970 to 1999. Notice the average return was 14.84%, but we had a whole different variance of returns. Some great years, some really bad years, some really good years, etc. But if we plug that exact same strategy of taking a 10% withdrawal rate, look at how quickly this person went broke. 13 to 14 years. You say, well, how can that be? The market earned 14.84% and I only took 10%. And the reason is because of fluctuating returns. Right now, this is the part that's really eye-opening to people, is that not only equities, in this scenario, I'm using 100% equities. Most people are not in that situation in retirement, but bonds fluctuate as well. But the point I'm making here is, if you look at year 5, in year 5, you had dwindled your account all the way down to $500,000. Now, maybe you earned 37, but you only earned it out of $500,000. So this down periods and these fluctuations in markets can be very, very painful. I think this is really important to focus on, because volatility, which is just the fancy word for fluctuating returns, can make a really, really big difference in your retirement. So what a lot of the financial community has done over the last 20 or 30 years is they have come up with an attempted solution to help people with the amount of money they can withdraw. And what many use is a software program called Monte Carlo simulation. And what it is it's a simulation that uses different rates of return for all different types of vehicles over the last 100 years to calculate the historical probabilities of running out of money years into retirement based on the withdrawal rate chosen off of a beginning asset value. So these programs run thousands of different simulations for every 15, 20, 25, and 35-year rolling periods, and take into account all types of market conditions and interest rates. So great periods of time and awful times. The results of these simulations are pretty much the same no matter who runs them, since they're all using the same software and the same numbers and interest data. So no matter who you go to, Vanguard, Fidelity, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, First Republic, they're going to come out with pretty much the same numbers because they're all using the same data. And what comes out is a graph that looks like this. Okay? And what does this graph tell us? The left-hand side is your probabilities of not running out of money. The bottom axis is how many years the money goes into retirement. And your curves, or your lines here, are the amount of money that you could withdraw off of a portfolio. Now, for purposes of this analysis, we use, and it's in the fine print, a 50% stock portfolio, 25% bond, and 25% T-bill portfolio. So a pretty standard retiree. I'm not a wealth manager per se, but it's a pretty standard retiree portfolio. And what did it tell us? It tells us that if we want to have a high probability of not going broke, we need to stay in that 3 to 4% range. Now notice, if we took a 6% withdrawal rate or even an 8% withdrawal rate, we have about less than a 10% chance of success, meaning 90% of the time we're going to fail. So we also ran these analyses based on various stock allocations and between stocks and bonds, but you can see the difference is not really that different. Anytime you get out of that 3 to 4% range, the numbers start to get really, really scary in terms of probability of success. So while this solution fixes one problem, which is the issue of running out of money with low probabilities, it creates a whole nother problem altogether, which is kind of what that video alluded to, which is for every $1 million at 3 to 4% withdrawal rates, which is the safe withdrawal rate. Now, I'd like to add, I think it's important, an anecdote here. Monte Carlo simulation is backward looking. So it is looking at the last 100 years of data. If you weight the last 20 to 30 years of data, that 3 to 4% number goes far lower. And in fact, there are some very, very smart mathematicians, a guy by the name of Wade Pfau, who his math comes in somewhere around 2.4% in today's environment. I'll get into that later, but I like to use the 3 to 4% because that's been kind of the gospel. Although I will tell you that that is a little bit of a flawed number. And I don't say that to scare you. It's just, unfortunately, mathematical reality. So the reality of it is many people, no matter who you are, and this is all scalable, so we just use $1 million as our number, need to be taking 7 to 13% rates to achieve the adequate income that they need for their household retirement. But that brings us back to the question, how do we do this without a high probability of running out of money? So if we took 7 to 13, we know there's pretty much over a 60, 70% chance we're going to go broke. Now, don't get me wrong, there's an easy solution to this one. And I've seen a lot of members of the Harmonie Club, just keep working. As long as everybody keeps working and you keep earning money, you can solve problems. However, there are risks to that. Unfortunately, it's not for the scope of this conversation, but we do need to plan for the event that we may not be able to work. For example, sometimes health matters keep us from working, or unfortunately, and I think now is more telling than ever, sometimes just the market dictates that we're just no longer employable. So I do have a fair amount of clients who are in their 60s who plan to work into their 70s, and they've either been downsized, laid off, and they can't get back into the workforce. So although people's plans may be to work for a long time, we have to prepare for them because there's a chance that either health or markets may dictate otherwise. So with that being said, I spent a lot of time up front just kind of creating the problem. The good news is with Wade Pfau, who I consider a dear friend, he more particularly, and I've been kind of the voice of it, have looked at this a little bit differently and said, hey, well, this is the first generation that is retiring with, let's call it the 401k only retirement. Back in the day, you used to have pensions and people would go to work and they'd stop working and they'd get this pension where they'd get money for life. But unfortunately, in 1978, when Ted Benna created the 401k, what ended up happening was that pensions started to go away and 401ks started to become popular. I've done a lot of research on the theories as to why, but the short and simple answer is pensions were really, really expensive. And they were expensive for employers. So what they did was they had this opportunity to turn a 401k, which I might add, and Ted Benna has even quoted saying this, it was never designed to replace the pension plan. That's just what happened. So basically what ended up happening now is pensions disappeared. And now you have 401k only. And that is what we like to call an economic principle or power. The 401k really only covers one economic power, which is this power called the interest rate or rate of return power. Most people understand it. I invest X, it grows to Y. There's a second economic principle or power that was integral in pensions that is no longer in many people's financial wealth building, and that is the concept of actuarial science, right? So actuarial science is a discipline that assesses financial risks in the insurance and financial fields using mathematical and statistical methods. Actuarial science applies to the mathematics of probability and statistics to define, analyze, and solve the financial implications of uncertain future events. Insurance and pension plans have been the two main applications for actuarial science. So what's really interesting, and I mentioned this before, is that most people used to get these two economic principles incorporated into their wealth building by default because they had pension plans. But as defined contribution plans like 401ks, 403bs, et cetera, became more popular, fewer and fewer people have defined benefit pension plans. So begs to ask the question, who bears the risk of the accumulation and distribution for an employee's retirement plan under the defined benefit plan? Was it the employer or the employee? It was the employer. But who bears the risk and distribution of an employee's retirement income under a defined contribution plan? The employee. So this was a major transfer of risk and responsibility from the employer to the employee. And when you have a defined contribution plan versus a defined benefit plan, the big issue is that very little education has been given to individuals regarding what they must do now to provide for themselves. Equally important is that not only was there a transfer of risk and responsibility that occurred, but in a defined contribution plan, the employee is no longer getting these two economic principles by default, and they're just getting that interest rate and rate of return power. But now they have to go out and seek and understand how to incorporate this actuarial science, which used to be in pensions, that they are no longer getting by default. The crazy thing is that I can just tell you in private practice, maybe 10% are actually out there seeking it. And about 90% of Americans today do not have this pension strategy in place. And unfortunately, many of them are going to be set up for a very, very challenging retirement situation. I think it's worth mentioning that these powers were meant to work together and in balance and in coordination to achieve efficient results. Too much or too little is not good. So now let's fast forward, okay? When we fast forward, we've done our savings. We're now at whatever age we choose to create income, whether that's 60, 65, 70. Generally speaking, there are two global options for generating retirement income from the assets that we build. The first is a concept of exchanging or trading your money. Okay? Oversimplification, you retire, you're 65 years old, and you say, hey, I don't want to deal with this. There are institutions, and in fact, BlackRock is becoming a major player in this space, but large institutions, specifically insurance companies, have taken the risk off the table for people where you could just give them your money, and in return, they would give you a payout that you could not outlive. They are called pension annuities or income annuities. Now, oftentimes, anytime someone hears the word annuity, they think dirty word. Hopefully, I'll be able to dispel a little of the concern around that. But these are very, very low cost, low fee programs where you give them money, they really take a small spread, and in return, they guarantee you an income you can't outlive. Now, historically, that trade was about a 7 to 13% payout for life. So to oversimplify, if you gave someone $1 million over historical, now I understand today's world is not the historical, you gave them $1 million, they would give you $100,000 till the day you die. Well, you say, well, wait a second, that sounds great. What's the catch? There's always a catch. And of course there's a catch. The catch is if you die early, the $1 million that you gave to that financial institution disappears for you. But if you live long, you get that money for as long as you live. So unless you are a person with no heirs, no spouse, this doesn't really sound very palatable to people, but it does exist. But it doesn't sound like a great retirement option nonetheless. Now, there are variations of these type of programs which will pay payouts for husband and wife or spouse and spouse, but those payouts are nowhere near the 7 to 13. They're more like 4 to 6% guaranteed payouts. The other option is you can invest your money. You can go to a broker, you can invest in real estate, you can do all these different things. But the challenge with investing your money, and there's nothing wrong with it because we're big proponents of investing your money, is that investments unfortunately are volatile. So when things are good, you have to hold back. So when things are bad, you can subsidize. And that brings us to our kind of back to our 3 to 4% rule. If you go back and you talk to your broker and you say, hey, I've got $1 million, like, what can you earn? They may say, hey, we can put a portfolio, we can earn you 6 to 8%, but how much income can I get? Well, when things are good, we got to hold back. So I really only would recommend taking 3 to 4%, going back to that 3 to 4% number. So what's interesting is on their own, neither of these sound like great retirement options. But if we incorporate or we don't incorporate actuarial science, we're basically relegating ourselves to a 3 to 4% income rate problem. But when we do incorporate actuarial science along the way, we put ourselves on a path that can potentially provide far higher income rates from the assets we've built. And the balancing between these two economic powers is the key. Having too much or too less can make you more or less efficient. When you balance these powers along the way, you now can create options for yourself, right? One is looking at that exchange or trade option, which we call the covered asset strategy. The second is investing or using your money with the broker invested and using what was called the volatility buffer strategy to choose or combine however you want at retirement to give you larger income rates in retirement. So how does somebody do this? Right? What they need to do, and I think it's important to mention, is retirement assets by themselves have a really good value getting up the mountain, but they have a big issue getting down the mountain because they're generally only using that one financial power of interest rates. To set ourselves up for the ability to take higher retirement income rates safely, we need to introduce another economic power, and that is actuarial science. Right? And how do we do that? And that is used through certain types of insurance policies, which we're not going to talk about product or whatnot, but they are designed to not be subject to the curves of ups and downs and volatility. So what I like to say is on the left-hand side, you need to have both of these, right? You need to have retirement assets, and you need to have insurance assets. And retirement assets are what I like to call statement wealth. And what I mean by that is pretty much all these things on the left here, no matter what day it is, the statement will tell you what it's worth. It'll go up, it'll go down. Permanent insurance is what we like to call contract wealth. You know pretty much, as long as you do it right, exactly what you're getting, but you're not having the risks of volatility. And you also have this power of pooling, which is impossible to recreate on your own. So I want to just take a second and just talk about the power of pooling, because it is like, I call it the eighth wonder of the world that nobody really understands. But in today's world where everybody's talking about the sharing economy, the insurance economy was the original sharing. They were the original Uber, which is, hey, you know, if everybody comes with $1 million and they throw it into the pot, right? If you do it by yourself and you don't do that and you're 65 years old, there's a chance you could live to 95. So if you think about if you had $1 million and you need to make that money last 30 years, assuming no growth, you could take about $30,000 a year to live off of. But if everybody put their $1 million into the pot, we don't know who's going to live to 95. We don't know who's going to die early, but we can use an anchor point because math tells us the law of large numbers, the mortality is age 85. So now everybody could take $50,000 as opposed to $30,000. So that's kind of the power of pooling that is not available to people from an individual perspective. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that decisions that you make today are not locking you into which option you're going to utilize in the future. It's just the fact that you have these different cornerstones of statement wealth and contract wealth to give you the ability to choose or combine options at the time for retirement, because nobody knows what the world is going to look like, because everybody's retirement is likely going to be different depending on the time in which they retire. And that's the crapshoot. Nobody knows, you know, how long they're going to live. But more importantly, they don't know how markets are going to perform. So by having these two together, which is essentially how pensions operated historically, you can mitigate a lot of that risk and get far higher income. So let's go through the options. The first option is called the covered retirement asset. So the covered retirement asset is one that is accompanied by an equal amount of life insurance death benefit, similar to how most government entities provide retirement pensions to their employees. They lay the foundation for a self-made pension in retirement. This is accomplished through the interaction of a retirement income tool that is unrelated to those curves of withdrawal simulations called an income annuity or a self-made pension, and the death benefit of the insurance policy. Basically, under this option, the interaction of your retirement assets and permanent life insurance death benefit give you the ability to get a guaranteed income for life, which historically has been in the 7 to 13 range from the assets that you've built, while at the same time providing perpetuation of retirement income for your spouse and or a legacy for your heirs. The closer you get to having the same amount of retirement assets and death benefit, the more covered assets you can have and the higher your income can go. So here's a visual. The left-hand side is the traditional model over the last 30 years. You have $1 million, you can take a 3.5% withdrawal rate. It's not guaranteed, but you have about a 90% chance of not going broke. Comparatively, if you, while you're climbing the mountain, make sure you think about the distribution side and integrate both contract wealth and statement wealth in the right balance. So I want to be very clear here. I'm not recommending someone do one or the other. I'm recommending that a balance makes sense. And based on your age will determine the right balance. And to take this point to talk about people who are young to people who are old, clearly the younger people would like to have more balance for upside. As people get older, they'd like to scale back and have more balance towards contract wealth. But conceptually here, imagine if these people both get to retirement, but one has it this way and one has it with the two economic powers. The person with 750,000 in green in their retirement assets could pensionize that money and get that historical 7 to 13% or 75 grand a year, because they know full well that if they live long, they'll get that 75 grand guaranteed for life. But if they happen to be that unfortunate person that passes early, they got a huge benefit of a $750,000 life insurance policy that would come right in to replace. So it's kind of a rhetorical question, but if people have the same money, but one was structured this way and one was structured that way, and you're looking for income, it sure appears that the right side is far more efficient than the left, 35,000 versus 75,000. Now, what's even more interesting is you may say, hey, that's all well and good, but if I took more risk and didn't have as much contract wealth, maybe I'd have 1.5 million on the left side. But at 3.5%, that still doesn't get me to 75 grand. So essentially, you're taking more risk to not get you in any better place. So that's one option. The other option is this concept called the volatility buffer. And most of my hedge fund clients and my financial advisors that I actually work closely with, they tend to like this idea a lot better, mostly because of control. There is a little bit of risk associated with it via the covered asset, which is a fully guaranteed solution, minus, of course, the credit worthiness of the company that you're making the promise with. But this situation basically says, hey, and I like to use an example, and I like to use a boxer as an example. Let's say that you are the greatest boxer, you are the world heavyweight champion, and you are fast and you are fit and you are in terrific shape. When you go in and you're ready for your boxing match, statistically, the odds are you're likely going to win. Now, unfortunately, every now and then, the best boxers, somebody will get a couple hits in on them and they may get injured, okay? When they get injured, if they're asked to go out and fight the next day, the probability of them winning becomes a lot lower. That boxer is your portfolio, right? Your portfolio is the world class, right? And it needs to continue to be the world class. But the problem, and we learned this in March, is that the portfolio takes some punches in the gut every now and then, and sometimes some knockout punches. The key is being able to let your portfolio recover. Because if that boxer got hit and had a month to recover, to get back into good shape, they'd be able to be in great shape to continue to fight another fight. But unfortunately, in retirement, we don't always have that luxury. And what happens is our portfolio gets beaten down, but we still need income. So the concept of the volatility buffer is to actually let the portfolio have that rest. And the concept is that when markets are down or you don't earn as much as you need, we go to that contract side of wealth to allow you the ability to let your portfolio recover. And that is oftentimes utilized through that cash component of your insurance policy, which contractually is guaranteed to increase. So here's a visual for you. Left-hand side, much of the same. Right-hand side, in bad years, we don't touch the portfolio, but we take it from the place that we knew didn't get hurt. And I can tell you very specifically in March, I had many clients reach into these pockets because they did not lose a penny during the drop. And that allowed the portfolio to recover, which we all saw it do. So let's take a look. So again, we're looking at 1970 to 1999. Left-hand side, these are actual returns of the S&P 500. Somebody who did not get a chance to give their portfolio a break when they got a negative 14 and a negative 26, they went broke after 14 years. Somebody who had the ability to just take 3 years off. We're not talking about a ton, just 3 years off. Look at how much longer the 75 grand lasts, and they have $900,000 when all is said and done. Pretty powerful. Most people haven't had the chance to look at things from this perspective, but that makes a big difference. So us nerds, what did we do? We actually said, let's test this, because this scenario is looking at equities. You're like, no one's in equities. So what if we had a 50% stock, 25% bond, 25% T-bill portfolio? This is assuming nobody had any buffer vehicles for them. This is the same graph I've showed you now 3 times. Somewhere around 3 to 4% keeps you in the 90 percentile. If we just add 3 years of buffer, look at how much tighter the probabilities become. and also how much higher the distribution rates become. We go from 3 to 4 up to 6 to 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. If we can build 9 years of buffer over a 30-year retirement, so 3 years. Now, historically, it's about every 2 out of every 10 years, you're going to have one of those years where you need a buffer. You can take 9% withdrawals off of a portfolio. So let me kind of bring that back and make that real for you. 9% off of a portfolio means you only need $1 million to do what $3 million would be needed on a portfolio by itself. Because $3 million on a portfolio by itself is going to earn you, 90 grand. 1 million at 9% gets you 90 grand. So we've actually built out some software for people to help them make analysis around the decisions that they make and the effects of the income that they are going to have in the future. I do have a white paper, which I'm happy to send to people, which is it's written by Wade Pfau, and he's kind of signed off on the value of it, that I'd be happy to send to people. And with that, what I'd like to say is I hope this was eye-opening to people. I hope it makes you look at the world a little bit differently. And the one thing I would say is, for me, people always say, oh, well, why, people are like scared of this word insurance. What I love about this analysis is this is not saying you shouldn't invest your money. In fact, I'm a huge proponent of investing money. But what I think it can effectively and academically prove is that integrating a balance between the two. So interestingly enough, if you have too much contract wealth, your income actually goes down in retirement. Now that's pretty eye-opening to people. So there has to be this balance. And I have a software tool where I can show people, if you put your money here, this is what's going to happen. But we do have only about 10 minutes left. But what I would say is as people who know me, I'm very generous with my time. So I am very happy to just help and educate people and show them the software and run and help them in any way they want. This is my contact information. So if you want to take it down, feel free to email me, call me, text me. I'm happy to help in any capacity you see fit. We got through 50 minutes without my children coming in, but I think that's about to end because I saw them knock on the door. I tried to have the wife keep them downstairs, but I lost that battle. But with that being said, I hope this was eye-opening because that's what it was designed to be. If there's any questions, I would welcome it. I'm here as a resource. And more importantly, just thank you for your time. And I hope the one takeaway here is that when we make decisions, we should be thinking about the end in mind, which is what is that income in retirement going to be? And then make decisions based off of that. And remember the mountain, because it's one of my favorite analogies. And the best way to think about this is your investment portfolio will get you to the top of the mountain, but maybe a little bit rocky on the way down without help. So your portfolio will get you about 7 to 13% historically climbing, but will only get you 3 to 4 on distribution. The insurance side may only get you 3 to 4% while you're climbing, but get you 7 to 13 on distribution. So the combination of the two and the right balance is what ultimately leads towards success. This is how pensions used to operate, and we're helping clients and everybody try and just build their own pensions because data is proven that this works, number one, but more importantly, there's also behavioral statistics that people with pensions are happier. That's just a fact. You talk to cops, you talk to firemen, they're happy. You talk to people that are relying on what happened in the market that day or the price of oil, they're miserable. So even those people, if they have some sort of pension-like income, it just makes them happier. So thank you for your time. I hope this was educational. I hope it was helpful. I love giving back, so I hope it was well received. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, certainly, Jared. Thank you so much. We certainly appreciate it. I know I speak for everyone when I say we appreciate your generosity of time and expertise and that great analogy of climbing that mountain, but really recognizing the real end goal. and knowing what your end goal is, and obviously getting back down the mountain. I certainly learned several things tonight, so thank you. Learned about the insurance perspective and other things. If people do have any questions, now would be a great time. Feel free to unmute yourself. You can use, if you're on a desktop computer, the space bar on your keyboard as a push to talk button, or you can submit something in the chat feature. But Jared, just to have a kickoff question, how did you get into the retirement side of finances, and why is that what interests you most?
Some of it's dumb luck, but part of it's just me being like insanely focused on my retirement, and saying, hey, like, how did I get there? How do I get there as efficiently as possible? Because I think one of the challenges we have just in America today is, unfortunately, incomes have not moved at the pace at which cost of living has. And we are in New York here, that's even more so, right? So I was like, how do I do this efficiently? I'm a nerd, so I found other nerds who were smarter than me and could do the math. It kind of happened by circumstance, but I'm very happy it did, because I think it's very relevant to me personally, which is why I have so much passion for it.
That's great. Yeah, the passion certainly comes through. Well said, expertise. Okay, I don't have any questions from the group logged in, but again, I just want to say thank you, Jared. We really appreciate your generosity of time and your expertise. It goes a long way. Our Harmony Zone series is a series at the club where members get to share their passion, and I know I enjoyed hearing yours. So. Yeah, without anything else, I will give a shameless plug for the Harmony Club and remind everyone that we are open for business in all ways, and we look forward to having everyone back at the club. The ballroom is set up as a great member lounge with a bar on weeknights, and all of our athletic facilities are open by reservation only, of course, with enhanced check-in procedures and enhanced cleaning and HVAC system improvements throughout the whole building. So I hope that I see many of you who are logged in tonight at the clubhouse soon, and we can bump fists in a very socially distanced way. Jared, always a pleasure. Thank you again for logging in tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.